Everything's Cleaner in Texas, the show where we spotlight the people, processes, and products that are helping Texas clean freaks fight dirty better. From hospital sterilization teams to cutting-edge technology, from deep cleaning secrets to industry game changers, if it's making Texas fight dirty, we're going to talk about it on this show. My name's Hank Balch, alongside Dusty Glass, and every episode we'll be diving deep with the experts, innovators, and frontline fighters who are setting the gold standard for cleanliness across the Lone Star State. Because in Texas, we don't just fight dirty, we do it big. So grab your boots, buckle up, it's time to get clean. All right, clean freaks, you're listening to another episode of Everything's Cleaner in Texas, your favorite, and I think the world's only Texas Sterile Processing podcast. We're talking all things Texas, the big, the bad, the beautiful, and the dirty, because it's our job in sterile processing, obviously, to fight dirty, to get it clean, to get it sterile, and to keep it that way all the way to the patient and back again. And Dusty, we have got a fantastic guest in studio with us today, Shevelle Speed, a manager in Texas of sterile processing, but also the immediate past president of the DFW chapter of HSPA. We're going to be talking about the challenges of sterile processing in a big city. We've got another interview actually coming up talking about the other end of the spectrum. What's it like doing sterile processing out in the middle of nowhere, West Texas, and all the challenges and opportunities, that comes with that. But today's episode with Shevelle, we're going to be talking about the big city and the way to do it well. There are some fantastic hospitals. We talked with you, Dusty, early on in this season of the Houston Med Center and all the great hospitals and all the wonderful things that are going on there. Now we get to turn our eyes toward Dallas, Fort Worth. It's not my home, but my mom was from Fort Worth, so I've got a special place in my heart, at least for that side of the Metroplex. But we'll talk about the competition here in a minute, Shevelle. So welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you on today.
Thank you, Hank. It is such an honor, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
I told you before we started recording that I just felt like I knew you, like your name has been around for a long time in this space. We run around in very similar circles. We've got a lot of mutual friends. And I got a feeling that a lot of folks tuning in will be like, yeah, I think I know Shevelle too. Maybe they've seen you speak before. Maybe they've even been members of your chapter. Maybe they've even worked for you there in the DFW area. But would you quickly give us a little introduction to yourself, what your background is in SPD, and where you got to where you are today?
I am Shevelle Speed. I am currently residing in Dallas, Texas. My walk started maybe almost 19 years ago this year. I graduated as a surgical tech in Chicago. So I've moved to Texas 10 years now. And when I was in Chicago, I was a sterile processing technician, and I worked under an amazing leader she taught me a lot of things. I incorporated all of my teachings from my leadership to my foundation in sterile processing. I have been the local president for the DFW chapter for 2 years. I held the seat as president. I have traveled around different sterile processing to manage some processes that were broken and to offer solutions. When I think about my journey, I did not foresee sterile processing. I went to school for surgical tech. So, that was going to be the top-notch surgical technician. And my walk changed. I didn't know that it was changing to be here 19 years later. I was infected in 2009 in surgery, and I went to a hospital and they pulled 230cc syringe of lime green fluid out of my knee. I was lethargic. My temperature was almost 105, and I was critical. The doctor put me in an ambulance, and he said, I'm going to, take this infection, but I'm going to put you in an ambulance and I'm going to send you back to where they messed you up at. And I was like, where they messed me up at? I had no idea, what he meant by that. So
Well, you're probably also like, why are you sending me back there, Doc?
Yeah,
If they messed me
yeah.
up once. That doesn't
Exactly.
seem like the right
And I
place.
didn't want to go, but he said, you're septic and, we don't really want to touch you. And so I later found out that some instruments were used on me and I had a surgical site infection caused by dirty instrumentation.
Really? I did not know that part of your story. So this was 2013?
No, this was 2009.
Oh, 2009. Okay.
Yeah, this is 2009. And so then afterwards, I started hearing about the hospital. They had a bad name. I knew an employee who worked there and she apologized. She was like, I'm so sorry. Had I known that you were going to be a patient here, I would have did your tray personally. And to me, that just did not resonate right because every patient, right?
Yeah. I was about to say, I was like, that's kind of a weird thing to say.
It was. I mean, I appreciated that she said if she would have known it was going to be me, that she would have did something extra. But what do you do for everybody else? How many surgical site infections came from that hospital that year? How many people lost their lives? So for me, that became a mission that any tray or any person that worked under my leadership would never, ever quote that. We would never, ever quote, if I would have known it would have been you, I would have did more. I would have did better. I realized, and at that point, I realized surgery starts with me.
Now, what's interesting, Shevelle, about your story is we often talk about that on the front side. We're like, it could be one of us that ends up on the table. It could be a loved one. Well, there's also these stories like you described that it was us that were on the table and it was us that got the infection and it was us that had to navigate, that on the back end, because it's not just, okay, there's more treatment, or there's not just, okay, I was healed and so now it's done and then I can forget about it. To your point, there's a real emotional scar that it may heal, but you're still going to see the scar. You're going to feel the scar emotionally as well as physically. And I love that it's such a unique part of your story, right? Because you said that drove you to commit even deeper and even longer, right, in this career to continue to make the kinds of changes that we need, because we don't want that to happen to anybody. If it's someone that we know, if it's someone that we don't, right?
Ever. Yes. And so then I realized that surgery started with me. Every instrument that I touch, whether it's in decontam or it's in assembly, every tray that I sign off on that I've done my due diligence, it starts with me. And, for me, that was the beginning of Shevelle and Sterile Processing. That was the beginning of my walk. So here we are now, 19 years later.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've got a podcast and we're doing on the side that's just telling the stories of people, because this industry is such a people-centered industry, right? Like we talk about the patient, obviously, because they've all got their stories, but we've all got our stories too in SPD. And I would love to just know more about your personal story, but I'm going to have to skip on to some content here, Shevelle, because it's such a powerful story, though. Oh, man. Okay. So we kind of set this up in the challenges of life in the big city as a clean freak. And obviously, as you described, you're there in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So what's it like if you were to describe to another sterile processing leader who maybe they're working in a town of 10,000 or maybe even 50,000 people, maybe there's like one small community hospital there, which is not saying that those places are not important. It's not a big deal. It's not challenging. It is. And they got their own challenges, but the challenges are different. How would you describe the differences in what you encounter as a sterile processing leader here in Dallas-Fort Worth?
I encountered growth in my career. There was a leader who I was hired as a technician on Monday, and by Wednesday, he brought me in his office and he told me, I see something great in you, and I am now recommending you be the sterile processing supervisor. I quit in 3 days.
Doesn't that happen? That's not the only time I have heard that, but that's wow.
Yeah. So for me, it was growth. Ever since that first day in August of 2015, it has just been growth, and it has just been opportunity after opportunity. I feel that being in a big city provides definitely platforms for a SPD professional to excel in their career and in life. I realized moving to Texas, not only are the houses bigger, but the opportunities are bigger. The money is bigger. Salaries are bigger and the dreams are bigger. So that's what I realized. I haven't ever really lived in a small city. I did work in some, and in the smaller cities, I feel that it's less opportunity because there's not enough opportunity. So
that's right. You got like one department in a whole city. Maybe they have a manager, maybe they don't. But if they do, it's like you're just waiting around for that person to leave or die.
I'm glad you said
come on.
I was going to say retire or quit.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, retire from life.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's absolutely true. That growth potential can really be shrunk. And it's not, again, because it's not the same level of growth. It's just there's so many more options that are out there in these big cities. Dusty, go ahead.
Yeah, Shevelle, it was something that I really wanted to kind of hone in on because I think all of our listeners would be really intrigued by this, whether they're leadership or even, regular technicians. How do you deal with your recruiting and retention in being in such a large facility like that?
Currently, I work at Parkland Health and Hospital Systems, and we actually do not have retention problems. Back in 2020 or 2021, before I arrived, Parkland, there was a leader and he must have made a great impact. He decided to have an open house and let people from EVS, from the kitchen, from transportation come in and see what sterile processing is, what we do, and apply. And from that moment, the hospital's HR, they decided if you were hired here as a sterile processing technician, we will give you years to credit for your medical. So they didn't have to come in at base salaries. They got credit for their medical years.
How about that?
So we have some people right now who are making mid 20s that was only making $16, $17 an hour. So that was probably the smartest thing that I have ever heard done in sterile processing, because right now there are technicians who have been here 3 years, 4 years, and they had no idea about sterile processing. They just knew they wanted something different, and they are now certified. So that one decision to open up our doors to people who have no idea about what we do and give them an opportunity was the best, I feel, retention course that we could have done. Because right now, I think maybe 2 people I have known have left that were sterile processing technicians, and all of the leadership that I work alongside of at Parkland, they all have longevity here. They've all been here 10, 15, 16 years. So Parkland does not have that. Now, I have been at some place, but, and the funny thing is, we actually hired somebody and she did 2 years of orientation and she never even came to SPD. She got another offer that had more money on the day she was supposed to actually start in the department. That was just last week, but that's a one-off. But yeah, I think that was the best course of action to retain the people that was interested in wanting to work here.
And do you think, it's curious to me that you talk about that career, growth and opportunities there. Can you dive in a little bit more to that aspect? Because I would imagine that that's probably another reason why you have, the ability to keep and retain staff is because it seems like you have a really great career ladder there. And can you kind of talk about how that may be different from a smaller facility on the outskirts or in a smaller state?
Yes, the smaller cities, what I find is that a lot of people who hold positions, they don't leave. And as long as it works for them, it has to work for staffing. When you get a new leader who has been places and, have seen how to advance people, they want to do that. But you don't have that opportunity in smaller cities because of, number one, if you're the only, hospital that's there, you're not going to feel that you have to be competitive in your pay, with people. You feel that you can give them whatever and they'll take it because they just need that job. So the smaller cities, I feel that they do disadvantage to staff because they don't promote from within, nor do they feel that they have to educate you. They just want you to come there, do your job, and accept, what they have. There's no growth because there's no other opportunities. So those smaller cities sometimes is a disadvantage, because if you are never going to leave that area, then it's probably going to be okay for you to kind of stay. But if you see some growth, or you see a vision that you want to get out and just do more for yourself, then I think that's when the fire comes within you, because you already know, if I stay here, I'm just going to be here, retire, and as Dusty said, unalive right here and never do anything else, or never go and see anything else.
I said that. Okay, don't give Dusty credit for that.
I'm sorry. I meant Hank. I'm just teasing. I did mean Hank. But yeah, I think that's the disadvantage from a smaller city, that there's just no vision sometimes if there's no opportunity.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the competitive nature there. We kind of alluded to it a little bit, right? Because you just said, hey, if you're in a smaller facility, there's one hospital, there's no competition. So that kind of impacts your compensation as well as your growth potential. You mentioned there your facility, the way, it's really important. So I just kind of want to reiterate how you described this, that the HR department decided to count medical experience. So basically like any kind of healthcare employment prior to getting your sterile processing job, that's counting towards your pay grade. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
I'm understanding that.
That is correct.
And you're right. That is a very interesting and I think an uncommon approach to how these positions are graded, because most times they're like, well, no, you got to have been doing something like specifically related to sterile processing. Like sometimes they don't even take like medical assistants, or if you're like an LVN, if you work at a nursing home, like they won't even take any of that, even though that's even kind of closer to the kinds of stuff we're doing. So yeah,
absolutely.
I think to get us up competitive to that pay grade, that's a brilliant strategy. Talk to us about why people who leave other facilities, because this may be your experience, right? If you've got such an aggressive competitive pay rate, if you got long-term leadership like you described, I'm assuming that people want to come work there and that they're maybe leaving other facilities within the Metroplex. What have you heard for people's reason for leaving the other places and trying to come to a place like yours that is more competitive in this larger city environment?
Leadership. People usually leave other facilities because a lot of people don't even know that about Parkland. So we had positions open and I had 180 candidates to choose for one position. I was going through resumes like, wow, but it's usually leadership. And, I'm sure both of you all can, even think back in your careers, how leadership can really make or break an employee. My former director, she was also an educator and she also teaches a sterile processing course. And her motto was anybody can be trained, right? So although you may not have the experience, when you start off, you definitely will gain the knowledge because we promote education here. So a lot of times when you come from other facilities, you don't know what you're stepping into in another facility. You just know you got to get out of there and you need another job. But a lot of times I think it's bad leadership, or, it's leadership that, needs additional leadership training. So that was always, my reason. I never left a job for pay. I left because I just felt that the leadership here will never see my value. And sometimes that's why people leave.
Well, yeah, that goes back to kind of what Dusty was saying earlier, that it takes that leader to not only create the career ladder, but then also to communicate the career ladder and to equip your technicians to climb the career ladder. Like it's one thing to say, hey, you could grow here, but I'm not going to give you any opportunities to grow. I'm not going to explain how this happens. I'm not going to support it. We're not going to reimburse anything that you
absolutely
go get certified or whatever. That's night and day from a good leader, the way that you're describing, that just kind of pulls people to them. And you can see very quickly as a new technician, this person believes in me and they're going to support me. They're going to have my back, and they may not be able to give me everything I want as quick as I want it and open every door right away, but they're going to advocate for me. And yeah, you're absolutely right. That pulls in high performers, especially because those are the ones that get the most frustrated the quickest.
Yes.
If they feel like they've got a leader that's just not there for them.
Exactly. Yes. I've seen roles created if a leader could not physically, promote you, but I can't promote you, but I can create a role to see the potential, because I see this potential and I think that you will excel. So sometimes we can't pay you to be in this role, but I can give you the responsibilities. And sometimes that's what technicians, they also need. They just don't want to be sterile processing technicians. So for me, we're going to grow sterile processing professionals.
Right. Yeah, I love that. And that again, that opportunity for more responsibility is what incentivizes your high performers. Because if you got a low performer, they may not want more responsibility, right? Like they just kind of want to come in, clock in, get paid, and go home. And I understand that for some people. I'm not saying that everybody's got to be this A+ player. Like if you're following the rules, if you're getting your job done, I get it. But if there are those high performers we're describing, it's not all about the money to them. Like you said, like they want good leaders. They want good exposure to other areas of the department, other responsibilities. And they're often willing to do those extra jobs, those extra assignments, because they know it's just making me a stronger and more competitive candidate for growth opportunities down the road if it's lead tech, supervisor, manager.
Absolutely.
So let's switch gears here real quick as we start to move toward a close. We've got about 7 or 8 minutes left here. And this is something obviously that Dusty and I have talked a fair amount about. You may not know or remember my background, but I was the founder of the Kentucky chapter, the Kentucky, Indiana chapter back in 2015, maybe. And then I also founded the San Antonio chapter for Sterile Processing back in 2016 or so. So if anybody understands the challenges of running chapters, we got a good group of 3 right here that we can tell you the war stories. We can tell you how much harder it is than it looks, how much more difficult it is to drive change in those chapters and to sustain the change in the chapters. Interestingly, if you're looking at big cities in Texas, you got Houston, you got Dallas-Fort Worth, and you got San Antonio. Those are the big 3. Like obviously Austin's there, but it's probably a solid number 4. So we've all experienced a little bit about what I'm going to ask you here, Shevelle, but what's life like running a chapter in a big metroplex like this? What are the opportunities? What's the upside? And then what's the downside in trying to get people together in this vision that we have for these local chapters?
The upside is everybody's excited. Everybody's, hey, we want to be a part of it. We are so glad that, this chapter is here. Let's get together, send me information. And everybody is just so excited when the announcement of the chapter is put into place. The downside for me was I didn't have a lot of support and I didn't know how to go get the support, right? I talked to Tony Bondin, our president, several different times. And one time I was so frustrated and I was like, I just want to do something. I just want to get this chapter going. I just need something. He was like, okay, I'm going to put you in touch with somebody and, he's going to help you because he knows a lot of leaders across, the Metroplex. And I was like, great. And so he did that. And that was the launch of the DFW HSPA back when we had our launch March of 2024. And it was amazing. I had fantastic speakers. I had 140 people that registered to come. Only 98 showed up, but
that's still great.
Yeah, it was. And the lunch was amazing. And, and everybody, when they left the lunch, they was like, oh, we're excited. This was so good. Keep us posted on the next. And I kept pushing. Come on. I need memberships. I need, you guys to, sign up to be a membership. I need people on the board. And it just really went quiet. So, again, everybody's very excited, but when you are starting to ask people to take on, to have roles or to be on committees, it's it's very
I'm excited
hard
for someone else to do it. Come on.
Yeah.
I want to enjoy it, but I don't necessarily want to spend the time or the effort to make it happen, right?
Yeah. And that's the part, unfortunately, that I ran into, because again, I could only do so much by myself. And I really wanted to see great things for the chapter. I wanted to do a football kickoff. Everybody loves football. And, you down here with the Cowgirls fans.
That's right.
So everybody, they were excited. But, people, you send out dates and, hey, how's this work for everybody? But you just can't get that collaboration, because I needed more leadership people, or people to help me in that type of role, because it's a vast task. We need people who can really think on how to help my vision and whatever you want to bring to the vision come to life. And it was overwhelming.
Yeah, Dusty, it's a different skill set in running these chapters, right? Like, to be a fantastic sterile processing manager, director, you got a certain set of skills.
Absolutely.
To be a fantastic program organizer, event planner, marketer, cheerleader.
Yes.
Like, those are different skill sets. It's not surprising many times, like, we get in these scenarios that, we got passionate leaders like us that want to see something happen. But, to your point, Shevelle, almost inevitably, and this is the story that we hear from every single chapter leader that you talk to, there comes a time where there's just not enough people that are pushing the mission. And the president or the vice president or even the board, there's just not enough people there to get it across the finish line and keep that momentum going. So yeah, Dusty, I'm kind of curious. I know you're still new into the uptake for the Houston chapter, but even this vision for the podcast is a very unique angle in trying to solve some of those issues that Shevelle mentioned, right? It's just like, how do we get people excited and keep them excited, and how we get them plugged in and a part of what's going on. But then you also built a website that I thought was really curious. You got signed up for the Sterile Works online networking thing that I think was really different. Like, you might have been the first chapter in the country that signed up for that. So kind of talk us through a little bit from your perspective, Dusty, on why you went those directions, and then maybe some of the early momentum or the feedback that you've gotten from some of your membership on that.
Yeah. Well, Hank, I think that, that is what Shevelle said is absolutely key. The more plugged in you can be, and you have to realize, like, the generation that you have, are becoming more to the TikTok, Instagram, social media landscape, to be able to reach out, to be able to get that audience. You have to have an online presence. You have to have something that is like something instant where you can instantly reach out to a lot of people. Email is pretty much snail mail. What putting a stamp on a letter used to be is now email. If it's not instant pinging to their phone, you have a few moments to kind of grasp that attention, to be able to get that involvement. And I think the hardest thing is to keep that, because you have to consistently be doing those same things over and over, and being able to change it, modify it, have new hooks each couple 6 months or so, to be able to drive that, that membership, the people who are excited about it. What happens is that, just like Shevelle said, is that, you have people who are, the bandwidth is, you have someone that is doing 90% of the work, and you have all of these other folks who are at that 10%, and it is taxing, it's draining, and you have a lot of, you need that support from other folks, and really need support from whatever role you're in. Some of the most successful chapters I've seen are run by vendors. That is what they're getting this content from their workplace, or they're
they
able
get paid
to
kind of to do that,
and they get paid
Which is not true
that
for chapter presidents.
And
Exactly.
So I think that those are what you see when you see a successful, and you're like, wow, how are they able to do all those things? Their role is probably a little different than your typical, leadership role that you see in your normal chapters. But at the end of the day, I think what matters the most is that I remember when I first got into sterile processing, I never heard about any of these things. Never heard about a chapter, never heard about podcasts of sterile processing. I've never heard about any of these things. It was kind of, they didn't even pay you an increase if you got certified, in a lot of places. So to see the aggressive growth that we have had and the critical intention is what I would say for education, career growth, and just that fire to be better and be that A grade is a wonderful place to be in right now. And I can only see us going even further.
Absolutely. And you're right, Dusty. You do the social media. That's not a big part of my life. So I think for me, that was my disadvantage. At this stage of my life, social media is not in my hand all the time. So for, like you say, vendors, they're always on social media or emails because they got to continually keep themselves and their product relevant. So, and the person who actually helped me get started with the launch, he was a vendor and he knew everybody and he knew how to bring everybody to the table. So you're absolutely right, Dusty. That is definitely a great observance. I just didn't even think of that, but you're right.
Yeah. It'd be great sometime on a future episode to talk about that vendor piece of the puzzle. I think on this season, we talked to Ron Hunsucker out of Healthmark, and is his impact, like he had a major impact for the launch of the San Antonio chapter when I was down there, because that's actually where he's based.
Okay.
And of course, he knew everyone in South Texas. He knew all the leaders. He knew the other vendors and such. But I think that specific skill set, again, going back to the skill set conversation, if we could talk more about the best practices for utilizing and working with vendors to drive these chapters forward and make them successful, I think that would be a really good resource, good use of our time, because you can do it well, and then you can do it in a way that's not done well, where like the chapter kind of feels like it's been taken over by a particular vendor or vendors, and then people get kind of territorial and they get weird about it. And like, we don't want that, right? Like, we want it to be open. We want it to be collaborative and successful and valuable. But all that being said, we have run out of time, Shevelle. I want to leave you with the last word. I know. I told you before we started, the time's going to fly. We talked about a lot of wonderful things, right? Like, we kicked this thing off talking about your story and the impact that you had, with that HAI. And then we talked through the awesome opportunities and cultures that you've built at your facility, the ones that you've been able to be a part of with long-term leadership, with creative ways to incentivize retention. And then, of course, we're just kicking around, like, how do we, to bring the success that we have in our departments and our personal life, how do we bring this to successful chapters? Because I'll tell you, there's very few chapters across the entire country that feel like they've got it figured out. I think most are like, I still need to get the setup right. I need to get the team right. I need to get the communication right. I need to get creativity. I need to get vendor support right. Like, they're still trying to work through. So we talked about all of that. What would you like to leave the audience with today? Kind of your final words on encouragement or, issues that we need to talk more about here in Texas at the chapter level, at the facility level. You can kind of go any direction you want with it.
I think I would just like to encourage people that, especially new technicians or people who are trying to find a career path, that sterile processing we are unforgotten heroes, that our job is so critical and so important. And the world of sterile processing will continue to grow. We have seen so many changes and so many people fighting for us down even at state level that people are just pushing sterile processing. So I think that if you ever decide that you need a career change, that sterile processing is definitely a career that it's rewarding, because every person deserves to go home safely. So for me, I would just say continue to educate yourself, stay relevant, and just keep fighting the good fight. We need more good people out here that actually care. We need people who want to succeed, and we need people to help our leadership that works under that people that work under our leadership. We need those good technicians so that we can train them and pour into them to be leaders in the future, to continue to stay in the good fight.
I love that. Well, that was Shevelle Speed. She's a manager of sterile processing here in the great state of Texas and the immediate past president of the DFW chapter of HSPA. I know Shevelle is on LinkedIn if you want to connect with her, if you want to reach out. But you can also probably reach her via email, and we'll try to put her email contact in the show notes of this show so you can reach out to her. But Shevelle, thank you so much for your time and your passion and your leadership in this state and in the industry at large.
Thank you, Hank, for this amazing opportunity and to meet Dusty. And Dusty, I would love to learn more about your chapter, and I will continue to follow you, Hank. You're doing amazing things out here in the world of sterile processing with the podcast and just keeping us relevant and, keeping us connected. So thank you.
All right. So we want to thank all of our listeners out there, you clean freaks, not only here in Texas, but we know we got folks tuning in from all over the globe. You're just kind of curious what's going on down there. What is this show all about? And hopefully through the conversations, not only on today's episode, but the rest of this series, hopefully you're encouraged the potential and the value of this kind of media to impact, encourage, inspire your technicians in your facility, in your state, and across the globe. Until we talk to you again next time, we want to remind you, like we do each and every week here at Beyond Clean, to keep fighting dirty. All right, if you loved today's conversation, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review, because this fight against bioburden is as big as Texas. If you've got a sterile processing tip, story, or even product that's making it easier for Texas clean freaks to fight dirty, we want to hear about it. Connect with us on social media, anywhere you find Beyond Clean. That's Facebook, LinkedIn, X, and YouTube. Until next time, lasso up those dirty trays and saddle up those sterilizers, because we're about to show the world why everything's cleaner in Texas.